Yes, sir.
I think now we shall begin and gradually people will join. Okay? Okay. Uh, so, good afternoon and welcome to this session. In the previous class, actually, we had a discussion on the Dalit movements and also some OBC movements and all that. And gradually, we shall get to know more about certain other movements also. So, let us today have a discussion on ethnic movements. And while discussing these ethnic movements, also we shall have a reference to the tribal movements because tribes are also a particular group based on ethnicity. So we have also will have a discussion on the tribal movements. So the special. By the way, am I audible? मते सुनी पाउछन्ती? Hello, am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Oh,
Yes, sir.
Son of
Yes, sir.
okay then, no problem. You know, ethnic movements are not only a post-independent phenomenon. Also, before our independence, there are also ethnic demands by various ethnic groups. And you know, these ethnic groups during the time of British rule, they are also demanding for their recognition. You know, to define the ethnic modes, it is always necessary to understand what should we mean by ethnicity. Ethnicity ଅର୍ଥ କ'ଣ? ପ୍ରଥମେ ଆମେ ସେଟା ବୁଝିବା ଦରକାର. You know, ethnicity is always a demand for identity. And there are certain markers ଯାହାକୁ ବେସ୍ କରିକି ଆମେ ଗୋଟେ ethnic group କୁ identify କରିପାରିବା. And those markers can include a language, it can include culture, race, it may include customs, religion, history, economic experiences. ଧର ଗୋଟେ ନିର୍ଦ୍ଦିଷ୍ଟ ଗ୍ରୁପର ମେମ୍ବର ମାନେ ଯେଉଁମାନେ ଗୋଟେ କମନ୍ ହିଷ୍ଟ୍ରିରୁ ଆସିଛନ୍ତି, they use a common language, they are from the same cultural race, ଆମେ ତାଙ୍କୁ ଗୋଟେ ethnic group ବୋଲି ଗ୍ରହଣ କରିପାରିବା. So these are the markers: culture, race, language, religion, custom, history, economic experiences. ୟାକୁ ବେସ୍ କରିକି ଆମେ ଗୋଟେ ethnic group କୁ ଆମେ identify କରିବା. That one ethnic group is different from the other. I think you understand. And how can we categorize? ଆମେ ବିଭିନ୍ନ ପ୍ରକାର ethnic group କୁ କେମିତି identify କରିବା ବା ଗୋଟେ ethnic group କୁ ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ ethnic group କୁ କେମିତି segregate କରିବା? These are the markers. So for a group of people to share such attributes, another requirement is that they get mobilized into the some sort of a collective action. କାରଣ ଗୋଟେ ନିର୍ଦ୍ଦିଷ୍ଟ ଗ୍ରୁପ ଯେତେବେଳେ କିଛି ଡିମାଣ୍ଡକୁ ଫୁଲଫିଲ କରିବା ପାଇଁ ଗୋଟେ ଆନ୍ଦୋଳନ କରୁଛି, they must have a collective action in fact. So the number of markers or attributes which form the basis of one ethnic group, it depends on the choice of their actors. So we have already made references to multiple attributes like race, language, culture, religion. In India, for example, religion-based mobilization is called communal mobilization. I mean, communal movement विषय पढ़िया या पर American and European traditions, they categorize the mobilizations based on single attribute like language, religion, caste, etc. as ethnic mobilization. So more or less, ethnicity is a relative term. It differs. गोटे एथनिक ग्रुप आ गोटे एथनिक ग्रुप निजको डिफरेंशिएट करे एवं जो पॉइंट्स ऑफ डिफरेंशिएशंस दे डिफर फ्रॉम प्लेस टू प्लेस, फ्रॉम कंट्री टू कंट्री. एंड एथनिक मूवमेंट्स रो सबुटु इंपोर्टेंट गोल बा फंडामेंटल गोल हैला हेलो हेलो
Yes, sir.
ए मझे मझे टी कनेक्टिविटी के प्रॉब्लम रहला टी मिनट खंडे ओके सो आई
Okay,
एम
okay.
लिंकिंग इट टू अनदर डिवाइस. So ethnic study of ethnic movements definitely shall be very interesting for us. हमें प्रथमे in the beginning chapters we have talked about the approaches. So the ethnic movement गुड़ा को study करिया पे मध्य there are few approaches and particularly scholars have identified three important approaches. One is called primordial, another approach is called the instrumentalist approach, এবং ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ approach ହେଉଛି ଯୋଉଥିରେ କି both primordial ଏବଂ instrumentalist ଉଭୟର features they are present. So primordial approach, instrumentalist approach, and another is primordial cum instrumentalist. I mean, they are present in a very admixed form. So in the primordial approach, this approach to the study of ethnic movement, it holds that the basis of the formation of the ethnic groups are given. I mean, the traits or the features of an ethnic group which are inherited by them, for example, culture, language, custom, so that are given. They are not constructed. They are rather given to them. So The traits are very much present in the system, but the other approach says that is the instrumentalist approach. They believe that ethnic groups are creation of the leaders or the elites of the society. They are not given, they are created. So this is the basic difference. In instrumentalist approach, the advocates of this particular approach, they believe जे जो ट्रेड बा जो कल्चर टा बा गोटे फीचर्स टा जोटा कि गोटे निर्दिष्ट एथनिक ग्रुप भितरे एग्जिस्ट करूची, दोज आर क्रिएटेड बाय द एलिट्स ऑफ द सोसाइटी ऑफ दैट पर्टिकुलर ग्रुप और द लीडर्स ऑफ दैट पर्टिकुलर ग्रुप. So this is the basic difference between the primordialist approach and the instrumentalist approach. ଆଉ ଯୋଟା ହଉଛି third approach, that is the primordialist cum instrumentalist. उभय approach रो किछि किछि features सेतरे present. They believe that both these approaches are marked into bipolarity. So the basis of ethnicity is either given or imagined or constructed. So they advocate for the combination of both the primordial and instrumentalist approach instead of a bipolar approach. So more or less this is about the approach to the study of ethnic movements. आमे बर्तमान आमर इंडिया केस रे स्वाधीनता परवर्ती समय रे की प्रकार सब एथनिक मूवमेंट और पे बहुत हमें some few examples we can take. आमे देखिया आमर कंट्री रो प्राय almost all the major portions of our country, they have witnessed ethnic movements to some extent. अनेक समय एथनिक मूवमेंट मध्य किछि किछि स्कॉलर्स कहचंती these are self determination movements, मान निजु को डिटरमिन करिया पे, कारण प्रथम मु कहिछि एटा होछि गोटे डिमांड फॉर आइडेंटिटी, निजर परिचय को साब्यस्त करिया पे, दिस इज द डिमांड. So sometimes scholars call it self determination movement. In most of the regions in the post-independent India, the movement, it has started with a demand based on single marker like language or culture. And they drew support from the members of the group, those who are having the similar language or culture. We can have a brief look to the study of these ethnic movements in the northeast region, also Dravidian ethnic movement in the south, and also movements in Jammu and Kashmir, Punjab, etc. You see, in Tamil Nadu, I have a reference in the previous class, there is E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar. In the legacy of Naikar, 3 issues form the basis of ethnic movements in the first 2 decades after independence: language, the Dravidian culture, and religion. The leadership of the movement argue that imposition of the North Indian Hindi language or Brahminical Hindu religion and Aryan culture, they were detrimental to the development of the Dravidian region or Dravidian identity. সেটা অলরেডি আমি কইছে কিন্তু ସେମାନେ ব্রাহ্মণিকাল ডোমিনেশন বা আরিয়ান ডোমিনেশন বা হিন্দির ডোমিনেশন কু ସେମାନେ বিরোধ করଥିଲେ. Therefore, the Tamil ethnic movement had demanded stopping the imposition of Hindi language and secession also from India. ତେଣୁ ଆପଣମାନେ ଦେଖିବେ ଯେଉଁମାନେ ଇଣ୍ଡିଆନ୍ କନଷ୍ଟିଟ୍ୟୁସନ ପଢିଛନ୍ତି ସେ ସମୟରେ ଲାଙ୍ଗୁଏଜ କମିଶନ ବସିଲା, 3 ଲାଙ୍ଗୁଏଜ ଫର୍ମୁଲା କରାଗଲା ଯେଉଁଥିରେ କି ହିନ୍ଦୀ, ଇଂଲିଶ ଆଣ୍ଡ ଦି ରିଜନାଲ ଲାଙ୍ଗୁଏଜ ତିନିଟାକୁ ଆଧାର କରିକିରି ସେମାନେ ଗୋଟେ ଫର୍ମୁଲା ଦେଇଥିଲେ, ଦ୍ୟାଟ୍ସ ଦ 3 ଲାଙ୍ଗୁଏଜ ଫର୍ମୁଲା, so that the importance of the regional language also can be maintained. এবং ସ୍ୱାଧୀନତା ପରେ ପରେ ଷ୍ଟେଟ ଗୁଡାକ ଯେତେବେଳେ ରିଅର୍ଗାନାଇଜ କରାଗଲା, the reorganization of the states was on the basis of language. So, 3 language formula has actually tried to give a solution to this problem of ethnicity. The state actually, initially it was reluctant to reconsider the demand for the linguistic reorganization of the state. But it had to consider this demand following the death of a Gandhian, P. Srinivasulu, who died of hunger strike demanding a linguistic state of Andhra Pradesh. And government's acceptance of the demand to create Andhra Pradesh led to the reorganization of the state on the linguistic basis in 1953. Then you think of ethnic movement in Punjab. It was based on 3 types of issues: regional, religious and economic. And the ethnic movement in Punjab was spearheaded by Akali Dal. You must have heard about Akali Dal, who was spearheading that movement. And their argument is that because the Sikhs have a separate religion, they also speak different language, they should get a separate state and their identity should be established. So they launched a Punjabi Subha movement during 1950s and 1960s. The ethnic movement in Punjab again arose in the 1980s and it challenged the sovereignty of the Indian state. You must have heard about the Khalistan movement. It was a separatist movement, a secessionist movement. And the rise of Khalistan movement, terrorism, or in 1980s, it has been a sequence to the political developments in the country. And the 1970s, the particular decade of 70s, it was marked by the challenge of the Akali Dal to the dominance of the Congress in Punjab. And in order to meet this challenge, the Congress took the help of Sikh religious leader Sant Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale in 1980 Legislative Assembly election in Punjab. And you know, the use of the services of Bhindranwale, it had its cultural and political implications for the country and the state. And it encouraged the Bhindranwales to assert his authority independently and assume the leadership of the Khalistan movement. You must be knowing about more or less the state responded with the Operation Blue Star, sending the armed forces to nab terrorists who were hiding themselves in the Golden Temple at Amritsar, including Sant Bhindranwale. So, scholars have explained the ethnic movement of the 1970s and 80s in Punjab in terms of the socio-economic factors following the Martian perspective. And they have argued that Punjab crisis occurred in the wake of Green Revolution, inability of the Sikh farmers to meet the rising cost of the investment in agriculture, then rising unemployment around the youth and the growth of consumerist culture. Then we can have a reference to the rise of this ethnic movement in Jammu and Kashmir. The ethnic movement in Jammu and Kashmir, what are the bases? Mostly the bases are language, religion, and also geographical location. A section of the people of the state, they have argued, since the ethnic composition of the state in terms of language, religion, and geography is different from the dominant ethnic groups in other parts of the country, this region, that is Jammu and Kashmir, should be treated differently. And as a result, they demanded secession from India. And the most pathetic thing is that their demand was supported by foreign forces, especially Pakistan. And the popular leadership in the state, it has been divided on the basis of relationship of the state with the nation state. There was a Hindu ruler in Kashmir, Hari Singh, the ruler of the Jammu and Kashmir, initially opposed this accession of the state into the Union of India, but he had to agree. And Sheikh Abdullah supported the merger of Jammu and Kashmir with the Union of India. But in the course of time, he wavered on the issue. And he formed a plebiscite front. So many scholars like Balraj Puri and others, they have analyzed that the regions of the insurgency in Jammu and Kashmir include attitude of the central government, lack of opposition in the state, derailment of democracy by central and state authorities, leadership also, and rising unemployment, etc. And these regions also allege that they are discriminated against by the dominant religious communities and the prosperous regions. So these are few references to some of the ethnic movements in the post-independent period in India, in South, in Jammu and Kashmir, in Punjab, etc. Then we should have a special reference to the tribal movements, because tribals, they constitute also very important ethnic groups. Who are the tribals? Unlike the scheduled castes, there are different among the scholars say that there are differences among various tribal groups. Tribal castes, they consist of untouchables who are placed in the lowest rung of the Hindu society. You must be knowing about Varnashram and all that. But you know, the tribals, they follow multiple religions in the country. Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, sometimes, and most often they also pursue their own indigenous religion, native religion. But you know, even though scholars, they define tribes in their own terms, but there are certain points of commonality. You know, ଅନେକ ସ୍କଲାର ଅନ୍ତତଃ ଟ୍ରାଇବାଲ ମାନଙ୍କର କୋଉଟା ଫିଚର୍ସ, କେତେଟା କମନ ଫିଚର୍ସରେ ସେମାନେ ଆଗ୍ରି କରନ୍ତି. For example, the tribals, they live in their habitat, mostly natural habitat. They are close to the nature. Forest, woodlands ଭିତରେ ସେମାନେ, forest land ଭିତରେ ସେମାନେ ରହନ୍ତି. So they are close association with nature, mainly the forests. And they have relatively traditional means of cultivation, less developed market. Then there is near absence of the rigid divisions within the community and discrimination on the basis of birth. Then the presence of the traditional chiefs, headmen, chieftains, and mostly the tribals are very much attached to the traditional society, custom. ସେମାନେ ନିଜର ପ୍ରଥାକୁ ସହଜରେ ଛାଡ଼ନ୍ତି ନାହିଁ. They are very, very attached. So these characteristics, however, have undergone changes as a result of modernization. Modernization impact ଅବଶ୍ୟ ଟ୍ରାଇବାଲ ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କର କିଛି କିଛି ମଧ୍ୟ ଚେଞ୍ଜେସ୍ ହେଇଛି, ପରିବର୍ତ୍ତନ. Like education, impact of Christianity on their tribes, changing cropping patterns, then the penetration of the market, economic differentiation, then emergence of the middlemen. There are few features which have emerged after modernization. And these changes, they have given rise to the ethnicization of the tribes, reflected in their ethnic movements. Tribals, particularly prominent among these ethnic tribal movements, are the movements which are happening in the northeastern regions of India. That is the frontier tribes, frontier regions. And northeast India, as a single region, has the largest number of tribal population in the country. Uttar Purbanchal, the largest number of tribals they are living. They follow different religions, especially Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, indigenous religious trends. And it is important to note that the ethnic issues of northeast India, they are related to the geographical factors. its regional dimensions. So we shall find a large number of literatures that have existed on the northeast, and those literatures they try to seek to explain the ethnic problems of the region. You know, the problem of the northeastern region, like insurgency, autonomy movements, ethnic conflicts, riots, they have been explained mainly by two perspectives. What is modernization by development by nation state building perspective? ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ perspective ହେଉଛି the federation building perspective. ଏଣୁ ଯେଉଁମାନେ ନେସନ ଷ୍ଟେଟ୍ ବା ମଡର୍ଣ୍ଣାଇଜେସନ ପର୍ସପେକ୍ଟିଭ କୁ ଆଡଭୋକେଟ କରନ୍ତି, ସପୋର୍ଟ କରନ୍ତି, they largely argue that the problems of the northeast they are related to the issues of nation state building. And the main advocates of this perspective are S.K. Chaube, B.P. Singh, D.G. Varghese, Minor Winar. But interestingly, most of these writers, they do not hail from that region. They're from outside. The second perspective, जोटा कहूँ फेडरेशन बिल्डिंग पर्सपेक्टिव, is actually the critique of the first one. And that is available in the writings of the scholars, those who are from that region, like Sanjeev Barua, Udyan Sharma, Sanjay Hazarika, they are all Assam and all that. And second perspective रो जो माने प्रवक्ता से माने प्राय सही region रो लोको, कि the first perspective रो जो माने advocate, but scholars, they are from the outside. They do not belong to that region. That is the difference. So the second approach, or the scholars of the second approach, they argue that the problem of the Northeast India arose because the national leadership overlooked the perspective of the people in the region. They have neglected the regional problems. So in order to build the nation state, the central government adopted stepmotherly treatment towards the Northeast, ignored the periphery. And that is the main cause of these insurgency movements. We can refer few examples of these insurgent movements. Movement of the Nagas. Most often it is known as Naga insurgency. By the Nagas, it is called Naga National Movement. It is the oldest movement relating to the ethnicity in this northeastern region. The Nagas consists, they have also elites, जो माने कि leadership टाको आगौथिले, and those elites of this particular community, Naga ethnic community, they consist of educated people, those who are educated in the Christian institutions, and also some of these elites, they are from the few neighboring villages. In a memorandum to the Simon Commission in 1929, the Naga Club it pleaded to exclude the Nagas from the administrative reforms. which it was supposed to recommend and retain the Nagas directly under the British administration. Here it should be noted that in the course of this Naga movement and all that, there are also differences among the Naga leadership over the issue of Nagaland as a separate state within the Union of India and Nagaland as a sovereign state or nation. The former founded Nagaland Nationalist Organization and the latter formed the Democratic Party of Nagaland. And this particular issue assumed a new dimension after the signing of Shillong Accord in 1975. And according to the Shillong Accord, the Nagas accepted the Indian Constitution, deposited their arms to the government of India, and in turn the government released Naga political prisoners and promised also their rehabilitation. So, of course, signing of this Shillong Accord was not welcomed by a section of the Nagas. And we shall find that National Socialist Council of Nagaland, NSCN, which was led by Tangluk Naga, T. Muiva, and Isaac Shu, and this leadership of this NSCN, that is National Socialist Council of Nagaland, it has guided the Naga movement while staying outside India. And in their negotiation with the government of India under the Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee and Manmohan Singh, they have raised two main issues: the issue of sovereignty of Nagaland and creation of a Nagalim, that is territory merging all areas of northeastern states. So this is how the leadership of this Naga movement, they have fallen divided on certain issues and all that. Nagaland also witnessed other types of ethnic riots and conflict between the two major tribes of the state, Nagas and Kukis, which you must have heard also in the present. There is also this type of conflicts going on. Another important ethnic movement is the Bodoland movement. This is about Naga, then Bodos of Assam. The tribals of Assam, they are the Bodos, Karvis, Adivasis. They have been also involved in collective mobilization. The tribals of Assam, they participated in the 6-year-long Assam agitation led by All Assam Students Union, ASU, AASU, from 1989 to 1995. And the movement which was directed against the foreigners, they united the major communities of Assam, the tribals and also the non-tribal Assamese, on the common perception. They shared common experience in terms of their belonging to the backward and discriminated state. During the course of time, this All Assam Students Union, it transformed itself into a political party, that is Assam Gana Parishad, AGP, and formed the government following the victory in 1985. AASU, जोटा कि एथनिक मूवमेंट को लीड करथला से गोटे पॉलिटिकल पार्टी रे परिवर्तन हला आसाम गण परिषद आफ्टर द विक्ट्री इन द इलेक्शन it also formed the government. The tribes like Bodos, Karvis, which has participated also in this ASU agitation, started legislation for creation of their separate states. The All Bodo Students Union presented also, which was formed and presented a charter of demands. There are around 92 points of demand to the government, which included the demand for the recognition of their culture, their customs, language, and the demand for opportunities for their educational and economic development. And unlike ULFA, you must have heard about ULFA also, United Liberation Front of Assam. They want a separate state for them within the Union of India, under the Constitution of India. And during the course of the movement, they have resorted to violence, targeting the state agencies belonging to the central government and armed forces. This is about the borders of Assam, the ethnic movements in Assam. Then also tribes of Meghalaya. You must have heard about Khasis, Jaintias and Garos. They are the most important tribes of Meghalaya. And during 1960s, there are movements of these ethnic groups. And later on, their demand was to form a separate state of Meghalaya. And this tribal movement in Meghalaya, it saw the involvement of all ethnic groups and tribes and non-tribals. So we shall find Nagaland, Assam, this Meghalaya, the separate states, they have been created after the prolonged demand of these ethnic tribes. And in Meghalaya, these ethnic groups, they resisted against the language policy of Assamese government because these are all included in a bigger Assam, and out of bigger Assam they have been separated, and separate states have been carved out like Meghalaya and all that. So the views of the tribes, they're articulated especially by the organizations of women, students, and politicians. And most assertive among them is the Khasi Students Union, KSU, and the Federation of the Khasi, Garo, and Jaintia people. And this union and other tribal representatives argue that due to the influx of the outsiders, that the non-tribals, their cultural identity is eroded. So virtually, they were against this outside intrusion to their own culture. Also in other regions of the country, most prominently, northeastern region ଆମ countryରେ ଦେଶର northeastern regionରେ ଉତ୍ତର ପୂର୍ବାଞ୍ଚଳରେ ବେଶୀ ethnic movements ହେଇଛି. It may be Bodos, it may be Nagas, it may be Garos, Khasis and Jaintias. And also in other parts of the country, some tribal movements, ethnic movements, they have come up. In post-independent period also, non-frontier tribals, they have come up with movements. And these have included movements for creation of separate states for the tribals out of the existing states like Jharkhand, out of Bihar. You must be knowing that how Jharkhand, which was mostly dominated by the tribes, it was carved out from existing Bihar. Chhattisgarh from Madhya Pradesh. And separate districts within the same state like demand by the Dang tribes for creation of a separate state within the former Bombay state. So, likewise, there are some other tribal movements also in the in other regions. I mean, other than northeastern, for frontier regions of the country. So, the tribals of India, they have been involved in ethnic mobilization for different purposes, both before and also after independence. And we find that this ethnic mobilization is a continuous political process. So definitely this constitutes a very interesting study, that how in different regions of the country, the tribal movements, the ethnic movements, they have come up, and mostly they are more prominent in the northeastern region of the country. Then let us come to one of the most vital issues, I mean, vital movements, women movement. In India, like many other colonized countries, it was colonialism in the 18th and 19th century which brought the new economic and political process into operation. The coming of the British, the Christian missionaries, their criticisms of the Indian society, they all presented a very big challenge to the local intellectuals and social leaders. And it has brought the blueprints for a new organizational principle for the society. And in this backdrop, we shall find that the relationship between women and social movements is quite intricate. First, one is not very clear as to where and how do women figure in the broad contours of different social movements. Then secondly, which relates to the nature of the social movement, whether it allows the space for the articulation of the issues and interests concerning women. And historically, changing conditions of the women and their status constituted the core of the social reform movements. And by the early decades of 20th century, this core is enlarged by bringing two issues. And what are those two important issues? Equality of women in modern political and social realm, and women's role in the developmental process. These are the important issues which were brought in during the early decades of the 20th century. In the 19th century, Hindus, Parsis, Muslims, and the reformers of these religious communities, they took the challenge and they have tried to reform their own societies. For example, Ram Manohar Rohira, he attacked the missionaries for presenting distorted picture and also preparing agitation against sati system, customs of caste inequality. Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar made great efforts in getting widow remarriage society established. Similarly, women education too was thought to be one of the most important steps in this direction. Billi Singham Pantulu, Jyotiba Phule, Badruddin Tyabji, Dadabhai Naroji, they have all contributed in this direction for women freedom and emancipation. So feminist philosophy, जोटा कि आपण माने आपनका theory अल्प बहुत पढुचंती, it may be socialist, it may be radical feminism, it may be liberal feminism, it may be the principle of equality with men, or should we celebrate the difference, whether it is equality or difference? They have definitely prompted the women movements in different angles. So what was the exact nature of women issues? And how should they be addressed? Should they be treated purely as question about social inequality or attitude, or as part and parcel of larger political question? That was the issue. So there is an issue of priority, social or political. For example, the problems like widow remarriage, sati, they are not prevalent among the lower stratum of the society. And the low castes in general, irrespective of gender, they were deprived of education. Because in the lower caste, not only the women are deprived, also the male members are deprived. So it was not a problem with the lower caste. So, to the early reformers, this division did not present itself very sharply, as people like Raja Rammohn Rai. He articulated women's cause as integral part of his overall vision. And those who began to mobilize opinion regarding the economy and issues related to operation of the colonial system, they are also concerned with the reforms in the society and equality of men and women, and to have a just society for the women. And for them, the issues of economy and politics were not dissociated. It may be Ranade, Pontulu, or Gokhale, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, Firoz Mehta, Nauroji, Jyotiba Phule, and many others. They have actively campaigned for women's education and more demand for more public space. They say that women should not be treated as objects only for the private spaces. They demand more of public space for women. In 1920s, the Gandhian movement also brought a sense of unity on the women's question. The national movement during the Gandhian era, it created the largest possible space for the women to come out and participate on the issue which was ostensibly political, that is political freedom. You know, in 1927, All India Women's Association was formed as the national body giving voice to some of the issues of the women. And many of the women who were in forefront of the Gandhian movement, they have become involved in institutions all over the country. And those institutions where these women are involved, they play a major role in taking up seriously the social issues and mobilizing the leading movements in latter years. ତେଣୁ ଗାନ୍ଧିଆନ ଫିଲୋସଫିରେ ମଧ୍ୟ ଅନେକ women leaders they have been inspired. Think in terms of Chipko movement in Uttaranchal against the liquor vendors, against falling of trees. So here the women participate in the movement, protest movements, and mostly they are inspired by Gandhian philosophy of non-violence. The success of the Russian Revolution, 1917, encouraged a large number of women to join communist movement also in India. So in post-independent India state, it launched the array of reforms which had been demanded even before the independence, and there were demands that all customary religious and traditional laws which regulated the larger Hindu society and which to a great extent determines the legal status of the Hindu women in religious terms should be codified. So in 1948, there are also attempts to bring to the Constituent Assembly what is known as the Hindu Code Bill. You know, independence ପରେ ପରେ ମଧ୍ୟ Hindu Code Bill ଧରା ଆଗତ ହେଲା. And however, the stiff opposition led by dropping the idea, in spite of that, this bill was stable. And finally, it was in 1955-56, the Code Bill was passed in sections known as the Hindu Marriage Act, Hindu Succession Act. The government could not, of course, enter into the issue of personal laws of the other communities, like Muslim, Christian, or Parsi communities. The post-independent Indian state geared itself to the consensus that modern developed state and the political democracy would be safeguarded by the economic democracy. Women got franchise, the democratic rights, and the development would see that the women got the economic rights to practice democracy. So it is like in the post-democratic democracy, in the post-independent India, a full-blown theory of equality, rights and justice was placed. You know, another important issue even which is having its strides in the present society also, it was the violence against women in form of bride burning, rape, which galvanized the women movement. And it led to the feminist groups, especially since 1970s, campaign against dowry and rape. They're called the first campaigns of the contemporary Indian feminist movements. The post-independent Indian state is grounded on the idea of equality with justice. And this has been the consensus developed during the freedom movements. You know, you must have some idea about the Sahabanu affair. The Sahabanu affair brought the entire range of the issues related to women to the fore. It brought the India's state's attitude towards the issue of women in the context of a religious community. It also showed the weakness of the women's movement to mobilize its strength to fight for a common civil code. It brought the weaknesses of the progressive sections of the society to come forward and demand uniform civil code for all the communities so that the women's rights come out of the domain of religious into the secular legal domain. Then also some ideas should be, or some thought should be given to the women movements and their relationship with the leftist ideology. You know, the communist parties since 1950s, they not only provided women leadership, but also kept the women's question in the center of political discussion. The Sahada movement in Dhulia district of Maharashtra is one such a movement to articulate the demand of the communities and raising the question of the women. You know, the exploitation of the local Bhil tribes, the landless laborers, by the non-tribal local land owners was the key issue in this particular movement, that is Sahadara movement. And to add to the suffering of these tribes came the successive drought of the famine in Maharashtra. Though this movement had its origin in the late 60s through the traditional folkways like singing bhajans, etc., the 70s saw a complete metamorphosis when the newly inspired left leadership, the leadership believing in the leftist ideology, joined the movement, and Bhil women were mobilized gradually and in large numbers. So in 1970s, the Maharashtra agitation also spread to Gujarat, where women in major cities like Mumbai, Pune, Ahmedabad came out in streets protesting against the government. It happened in the background of the economic worsening condition of the people following Bangladesh war. In Bombay, for example, socialist Mrinal Gore and communist Ahila Rangenkar, they led the movement. The Maharashtra and Gujarat agitation gradually added to the larger opposition politics, which was being galvanized around this time. So, the arrival of the new classes into the picture, it meant that the political landscape would have become more complex and sharper questions to resolve. Gandhian ideas of feminist role or the women's role of the society are now in question. They have started questioning it. It is in such a situation that the mobilization of the women too began to take place. And also it's a time when the Western feminists, they began to raise the question whether the issues that they have been fighting for really applied to the third world women because they are doubly suppressive. There is suppression over the women. There is also dominance in the patriarchy, dominance of male members. There is also poverty. 1975 was declared the World Women's Year by the United Nations. The Women's Decade 1975 to 85 witnessed women-related activism by feminist groups, as well as also the political parties. And principally, they are all urban-based activist groups. It was also during the time that Dalit movement and the feminist movement, they got linked. In Maharashtra, some Dalit groups, they have also formed an organization that is Mahila Samata Sainik Dal. The Maoist groups and the Dalit organizations gradually provide new edge to the argument. And also, they have added new direction to these feminist movements. So the entire edifice of the social movement wanted to change the status of women. And this was in spite of the fact that in many cases, she was equal or superior to male perpetrators in status, education, and other indicators. Issues of not only women's right in a democratic system, but also the question of overall equality in a situation when the state is withdrawing is not merely a crucial political issue that the women's movement has to solve. It was also realized that while it has been pursuing the developmental agenda ostensibly for the betterment of women, the state at times was amenable to the forces of patriarchy. Sometimes it either openly or covertly supporting the patriarchal trend. Thus, the women activists, they have come to accept the movement for democratization has to be strengthened so as to strengthen the force behind the demand for better and safer daily lives of women. So, during the age of globalization, the need for a strong women movement was underlined again. Because new types of violent forces, they have been unleashed on women society, in the women community of the society. Then also, we have discussed about new social movements like ecology movements, women movements, and very soon we have movements in the different parts of the country which have voiced the concern of the day-to-day life and survival in the new phases of the economy and politics. And one of the chief characteristics of this new social movement, which I've already discussed in some other class, it has been the prominent role, including that of the leadership, being played by the women. So women movements have been placed as also a new social movement. So we find that women find their place in the forefront of many of these new social movements. And these women movements, they have tried to fight against the structures of the community and also tradition. And this was evident in case of the two powerful movements in 1980s. One against the issue of dowry and another in the famous case of Rup Kanwar, in which the latter was being burnt as sati. So there are strong protests against this practice, evil practice of sati. In case of the dowry deaths, tradition has been forwarded, whereas in the latter case, a young Rajput lady was made to die along with her husband. The practice of sati. These are the evils, social evils. So the opposition by the feminists and other groups of the sati and its later glorification was countered by the powerful combinations of the caste and community politics. So in the process, there were awareness of the new forces, both which supported the women's cause of equality and those opposed came face to face and was an educating direction for the women movements in India. Then with these ethnic movements and women movements, also we can see many regional movements in our country. What are regional movements? The very term suggests it is an identity movement seeking special privilege and protection in connection with a particular region of the state. So it is a movement for regional self-governance. In other words, it means a movement for state formation, a movement seeking pluralization, federalization of existing polity. And there are two important significant causes for this regional movements. Ancholika ବିପ୍ଳବ ବା ବିଦ୍ରୋହ ଏହାର ଦୁଇଟା important cause ହେଉଛି, one is the inter-regional or inter-community conflict, and the other important cause is the conflict between the region and the state. What is inter-regional conflict, and another is the conflict between the region and also the state. So, in other words, it means a inter-regional conflict is usually shaped around the insider and outsider complex, a complex that nurtures the nativism, son of the soil ideology, mulkis, for example, the mulki rule and all that. So anti-migrant movement in Assam and the tribal, non-tribal conflict over domicile issue in Jharkhand, they are some of the important examples of son of the soil ideology. And inter-regional conflict also occurs over regional pride, rooted in culture, language and traditions. Sometimes a particular region feels superior. Regional pride is extended further in the events of broader dispute and sharing of river waters. For example, the river water conflict between Karnataka and Tamil Nadu over sharing of Kaveri water. Then border dispute between Maharashtra and Karnataka. So the other one is region-state conflict. It usually takes place in the institutional structure of the state system, wherein the region question the distributive policy of the state as discriminatory. Region questions the policy of the state that this is discriminating against us. This is not giving proper justice to our demands, our regional interest. So this is region and state conflict. And viewed in this perspective, regional movements appear to be non-centralist, self-determining, and defining ideology of protest against the hegemony of the state power, against leadership of the state, and also against the dominant regional groups. Sometimes some other regional groups, those who are not dominant, they may accuse that state in connivance with the dominant regional groups is not taking proper care of certain regions. Regional movements, especially in a diverse society like India, they have contextualized formations. Therefore, it requires the analysis of the components of the complex interplay of the region, people, and the state. You know, if we sometimes look to the literatures of nationalism, for example, we find two principally important but dichotomous account of nation formations. They are the perennialist, primordialist, and the modernist. Primordialists consider identity as a pre-given entity. I have already given you in the approach to the ethnic movement and all that. They always emphasize on given features, given attributes, that the identity is pre-given. And interestingly, in India, a regional community may or may not have the pre-given bond of ethnic or culture. Some studies on the construction of Uttarakhand, Jharkhand identities have shown that it is the distinctiveness of the regional economy and ecology that created first an interest community, which over the years of cohabitation succeeded in creating a common cultural knot, establishing a common cultural identity. But how a regional community translates itself into a sub-national movement? To find an answer, we have to take into consideration the trends of modernization and mobilization theory of national formation. Like conversion of the community into a movement in a process of mobilization by elites, intelligentsia, and the leaders. And in order to provide further dynamics and cohesion to the community consciousness, identities reinvented, relocated. So sometimes the other approach suggests the process of identity formation is a complex one where the institutional structure, the reactive mechanisms, the policy feedbacks, and also the cultural conception of the state's relationship to the group identities, they play a very important role. Okay, just a break for a minute. Okay. Hello. You know, some of the Marxist scholars, like Hawthorne, he writes that regional identity is also formed at the point of interaction of politics, technology, and social transformation. Modern means of communication and technology, they create intentionally or unintentionally a collective self of the people who organize themselves into a movement. So, from these discussions, we may select some crucial variables which may help us in analyzing regional identity and regional movements in India. As we know, federalism is essentially decentralizing. It is a political program of institutionalizing autonomy of the society and polity. And it is expected to accommodate regionalism within the framework of a federal nationalism. But on the contrary, its working took a centralizing turn where regionalism was not only misplaced. So at one point of time, it becomes antithetical to the Indian nationalism or the national unity and all that. Another important variable is the party system and party structure. Many a times the leaders with considerable public understanding organize a party of his own with a defined enclaves of regional support or core social constituencies. And such a party usually survives on the ideology of regionalism and also ideology of subnationalism. So India has been territorially reorganized into several states and union territories. It appears that regional demands exist because of the non-congruence between the cultural boundary and administrative boundary. In many cases, the present states appear to be invented ones. And also, there are movements for statehood, and there are certain salient features which we can find from these regional movements seeking separate states. In India, territory and community, they're symbolically linked. And a region is known by the community. This is a feature. By the community which lives inside that region. Then people having distinct socio-cultural identity concentrated in few contiguous districts within the existing state system. They seek a separate state in order to preserve, protect, and promote their identity. And also another feature is that some of the regional movements, they seek constitutional recognition, protection, and they also seek legitimization of their respective socio-cultural varieties of the state by the state. And it is at this level that the demand for functional elevation of the modern tongue to the level of the educating and administration is made. And this also includes the inclusion of some languages in the 8th schedule of the Constitution of India. Linguistic pluralism is also another facet of socio-cultural regionalism. Then cultural homogenization by the state on the context of having a uniform national cultural identity is opposed. Therefore, most of the regional movements, they emphasize autonomy, especially in the socio-cultural realm. Then located within the realms of the identity and development, regionalism for sub-regional groups serve as an ideology through which they seek to define their own administrative and political identity. So, regionalism provides them a bargaining space in the overall process of nationalism and federalism. It acts as a countervailing force to centralization. It stresses for decentralistic framework of national unity, nation and state building and governance. So, what is the state's response to regional movements? The response is varying. There is not a fixed response to the regional movements. State केमिति react करे वा respond करे. There is not a fixed way. We cannot find any consistent policy in this regard. किंतु केते गुडे आमे patterns of response को आमे एतरे define करि परिबा. That their secessionist demand could not be considered when the demand of regionalism is taking the form of secessionism. They could not be considered, rather secessionism would be suppressed by all necessary means. This is a response by the state. Jadi gote nirdishta regional movement gote secessionistic attitude nela, separatist trend nela, the state sometimes suppress it by all necessary means. Central government could not concede those regional demands based on exclusively upon religious differences, and the demands for the creation of separate linguistic could not be considered unless such a demand is socially wide, economically viable. So, to illustrate, there could not be any singular constructor formation of the units of Indian Federation. So, the units of this Indian Federation should be composite ones, and such a composite unit could be formed only by mutual balancing of four principles, which the State Reorganization Commission, SRC, has underlined. The four principles are preservation and strengthening of the unity and security of India, linguistic and cultural homogeneity, financial, economic, and administrative considerations, and successful working of the national plan. These are the four principles on which the unit should be composite, and such composite units could be only formed by mutually balancing all these four principles. And these principles are underlined. They have been enunciated by the States Reorganization Commission. So this is the state's response to the regional movements in nutshell. You know, on the basis of this State Reorganization Commission's recommendation, the Government of India passed in November 1956 a State Reorganization Act. And the Act endorsed the bulk of the recommendation of SRC, except the merger of Hyderabad state into Andhra Pradesh, and Vidarbha was made part of Bombay state. So at that time, the number of the states are reduced from 16 to 14 in this act. However, the number of centrally administered territories were enhanced from 3 to 6. Major inclusions were Himachal Pradesh, Tripura, and since then the number of the states have been increased at different points of time. Since 1956, for example, Gujarat created 1960, Nagaland 1963, Haryana 1966, Punjab 66, likewise. You can have a number of examples that states formed since 1956. So, to sum up, regional movements are indicative of the identity movement of the people in a particular region or state, which try to demand for special privilege, protection, and concession from the state And depending on the situation, the state has been indifferent, or the state has to be accommodative, or sometimes state should act as a suppressor, depending on the situation. The coup case re, depending on the nature of the movement. As I have told you that if the nature is separatistic or it has taken a very violent form to demand for secession, then the state apparatus shall act as in a coercive way. Sometimes it can be accommodative. So depending on the situation, the state has to respond. So because these regional movements, they're related to the socio-cultural and political process, they're also, in a democratic country like India, they're ongoing process. They continue to exist. Then the other most topical discussion or issue is religious and communal movements. Religious and communal movements have been the glaring feature of Indian subcontinent in general, and India in particular. What is communal? In both political parlance and academic discussion, communal is used in a very derogative sense, representing narrow sectarian interest. For example, in India, before independence, political leaders described the Indian Muslim League a communal organization. However, for many Marxists and European scholars, it represented Muslim nationalism. And in 1946, overwhelming majority of the Indian Muslims voted for the Muslim homeland in belief that the creation of Pakistan would fulfill Muslim nationalist aspiration. So it is worth pointing that communal identities can be formed on territorial, cultural, ethnic, and religious basis, or a combination of all these bases. Both Hindus and Muslims, they have been mobilized on communal lines. India is not only their motherland, it is also their sacred land. But they claim that it is the land of the saints, the sages. The Hindu nationalists, they emphasize this common cultural and religious bond, creating an emotional attachment to this land. So the seeds of communalism or on religious lines, they're sown in a early British period. British rule somewhere communal seeds, it has been sown. The divide and rule policy, British माने जो policy टा follow करुଥିଲେ, divide and rule, it was largely responsible for this communal hatred amongst the different communities. କାରଣ ସେଇଟା ସେ policy ଫଳରେ ସେମାନେ ଆମ ରାଜ୍ୟ ଆମ ଦେଶକୁ ଶାସନ କରୁଥିଲେ by dividing various communal groups and creating hatred among them. In the census, the category during the British time. You know, the All India Muslim League conference, both of which, I mean, and also the ideology of Pakistan, it emerged. Social reformers and educators uh, like Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, who founded the MAO College, taught the Muslims that education and cooperation with the British was vital for their survival in the society. So Sir Syed Ahmad Khan was the first to conceive of a separate Muslim homeland. Along with the Muslim communalism, also Hindu communal sentiment were fanned on issues of cow slaughter, conversion by Christians and Muslims. So Suddhi movement was launched to recover the Hindus who embraced Islam or Christianity by the Hindu revivalists like Arya Samaj and other Orthodox organizations. In response to the formation of the Muslim League, Hindu rights swing political movement was started. And it has its organization on political lines in full swing in the form of Hindu Mahasabha and Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh in the beginning quarter of the 20th century. So the political ideology formed on the religious sentiments could not keep together the communities living in this subcontinent, in spite of the stronger secular nationalistic sentiment. So the independence of India accompanied its partition on communal lines. You know, if we have a look on the religious demography, the country has a total of approximately 1.3 million square miles, a population of slightly more than 1 million, according to the latest government estimates. Hindus constitute 82% of the population, Muslims 12%, Christians 2.3%, Sikhs 2%, and other including Buddhists, Jainas, Parsis, Zoroastrians, Jews and Buddhists is less than 2%. With such a vast and diverse religious configuration and having the history of rich religious origins, it is but natural that people of this land are bound to get influenced in their public and private activities by religious sentiments. So, in order to assert their religious identity in social and political life, all the communities have tried to woo the masses by raising emotive issues, because religion is one of the most emotive issues. It appeals to the emotion, resulting in destructive tendencies, affecting the nation building process and causing embitterment in the social harmony and discord. So, to give some examples of Hindu communal and religious movements, we can have this Hindu Mahasabha, which was the major political force before independence and which spoke for the cause of Hindus. And the RSS continued to penetrate the masses through the social service projects and its shakhas. The socio-economic and cultural reforms which the RSS undertook after independence, they're extensive and get a wide-ranging recognition amongst the Indian masses. So the RSS, in order to achieve its objective, struck at the roots of mass inertia. And Inevitably, the RSS educational and political agenda include both absorbing subaltern groups into the Hindu fold to fight against minorities, Sangha Parivar took recourse to rewrite historical developments which shaped the destiny of India. Then also there is rise of GHP and the issue of conversion. The process of religious conversion has evoked grave concerns against the members of the Sangha Parivar down the country, which was intensified and made to appear much more legitimate by giving the loss a patriotic and national color. And this phenomenon has been a key to the functioning of Hindu majoritarianism, particularly after 1947. It is widely assumed that Hinduism is unique among religious traditions in being non-proselytizing. Conversion to other faiths, therefore, is a loss that cannot be recovered. Then also the functioning of the Jansang in the early days, along with the promotions of the highly sanskritized Indian cow protection, the fight against Christian missionaries was made an important plank of the activities. Jansang organized an anti-foreign missionary week in Madhya Pradesh in November 1954. Likewise, there the history of their activities of some of the uh, Hindu communal organizations, and also the resurgent spirit of the Hindu communal assertion finally found a historic expression in Adhidhya movement, which Sri Girilal Jain described as the most significant event after independence. So RSS holds that the view that the Ayodhya, Mathura, and Kasi is not a political but a national question. Likewise, there are also Islamic religious communal movements, along with Hindu religious and social movements in the 19th century. The rising tide of Muslim politics was quite visible in the first quarter of 20th century, particularly after the formation of All India Muslim League in 1906. And the Muslim communalism, like other right-wing organizations, started acquiring color on religio-political lines. The Aligarh Muslim University fueled the fire by giving communal color in issues like Urdu language and separate electorates for Muslims, and steadily accelerated the movement for communal politics in the name of religious brotherhood. And events like Khilafat movement, Mupla riot in Kerala, propaganda of two-nation theory, demand for Pakistan, and finally the partition of the country were the outcome of such politics fanned on religious line. The slogans of religious brotherhood remained the main weapon for the political fight of Muslims, even in post-partition India. And the social elite of Muslim society also exploited the spiritual concept of Islamic brotherhood to expand the autonomous space for Muslim politics in the country. So, likewise, also there is Christian religious and communal movements. They have been also targeted attacks of other religious groups. The Hindu forces argue that the Christians have to Indianize themselves. Along with the issues of discord, there have been some attempts to resolve the difference between the Hindu forces and Christians. There is also Sikh religion and communal movements. Even after the independence, the Akali Dal continued to mix religion with politics in order to maintain separate Sikh identity, which we have just discussed so far as the Punjab movement, the ethnic movement in Punjab is concerned. Intense factional feuds in Dal manifested in the increasing pressure for reversion to politics of religion and culture during this period. But the ruling leadership, however, managed to maintain ascendancy of secular material consensus. The Batala Resolution of 1968 and the Anandpur Sahib Resolution of 1973, which meant in substance an adoption of Master Tara Singh groups, Sikh homeland thesis as the goal of Akali Dal. It proves this point. So from 1977 to 1980, Akali Dal enjoyed effective power in secular political domain of the state, along with control of the SDPC. That is Sikh Gurudwara Prabandhak Committee, SDPC. So likewise, there are so much of religious movements like Hindu movement, Christian movement, Sikh movement, Muslim movements in our country. It points out that India, which has been a land of various religions, is bound to be influenced by religious practices, beliefs, and rituals. And religion being integral to culture in general, or in the world and India in particular, they have been instrumental in molding the socio-political process. So despite the incidents of violence and discord, relations between various religious groups generally are amicable among the substantial majority of the people. And the general perception about the plurality of Indian society is that it brings religious leaders together to diffuse religious tensions. The annual Sarvadharma Sammelana, all religious convention, and the frequently held musharas, Hindi Urdu poetry sessions, there are some events that help improve the community relationship and brotherhood among various religious groups. So, prominent secularists of all religions make public efforts to show respect for other religions by celebrating their holidays and attending social events such as weddings and other functions. Even the festivals of one religious group, they have been attended by the other group. So there is a universal trend. The socio-religious movements that proved to be instruments of national consciousness in the 19th and early 20th century. With the passage of time, due to one or the other reason, they have acquired communal and political color. The religious rivalries within and between communities, they have roots which are century old. And these tensions at times, they are exacerbated by poverty, class, and ethnic differences. But the government has made some effort. Of course, not always the government is successful, but it is making efforts to prevent the incidents of communal violence and to restore communal harmony when they do occur. And also, we have sufficient secular provisions in our constitutions so that the brotherhood, the harmony, the fraternity among various religious communities can be established. You know, the social activists, the political leaders, that should assume a very active role in promoting this religious harmony, because religion being one of the most emotive forces, if not properly managed, if the religious affairs not properly managed, it can create discord, it can prove to be one of the most divisive and destructive forces of the society. So now, various religious communities, they have come up with secular ideas and attitudes towards the members of the other communities so that they can have a peaceful coexistence. And many religious groups, they have also participated in peace march so that harmony can be established. Institutions like bureaucracy and army, consciously they force loyalties that transcend religious beliefs so that they can also act in a very secular line to reassure the public faith, to strengthen the secular ideas and secular attitudes, so that in spite of the existence of various religions in the society, the whole Indian society can be unified. This is what is called unity in plurality or diversities. In spite of the existence of the various religions, we can have a very, very healthy society, democratic society where the secular attitudes and ideas can be respected. So I think it's time, and we should end of the discussion. And today we have discussed the ethnic movements with reference to tribals, the women movements, then the regional movements, then also religious and communal movements. Then some other 4 to 5 chapters can be covered tomorrow's class. Okay, I think I should call it a day. Thank you, friends. Hello.
Thank you, sir.
Hello.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Hello.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, sir.
sir.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, the friends. Hello. Am I
Hello.
audible?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yes, sir, you
It's
are
already
audible.
time and I should quit. Hello?
Yes, yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Hello?
Yes,
Hello,
sir.
friends? Should I quit the platform? It's already time and we have already covered a few important courses. Thank you for the patient listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.